I think there's a lot of sentiment that's pushing against it, especially regulatory segment, especially global issues that are happening. So I think there's reason to be worried about, at least in the short term, these stocks. And I think they're going to get hit over the next 2 years on all these issues. And so I think people aren't quite sure what's going to happen. Are consumers going to sour on Facebook? Are there new trends that people are using social media that will change? For example, just on Facebook. When you look at Amazon, they're obviously going to be facing some headwinds, again, regulatory speaking, like there's antitrust talk, there's all this thing that's going on. So you're going to see a reflection in the stock market in that case. And so I don't think it's a surprise.
What do you make of at least my premise that the biggest threat facing big tech is not some small startup upstart with new technology that's going to blow them out of the water? It's other big techs and perhaps government. That's different than what I think we've seen at a lot of periods in the past 15 years.
You know, we said that, and then we found Google suddenly appeared, right? You know, I don't ever discount a startup coming into the situation. So no, I don't agree with you on that. I think you never know.
Do you have any in mind that you've seen that you think are going to disrupt them?
I was just talking about this on my podcast recently, is there aren't any. And there's a lot of the big tech, they remind me of three giant trucks going down the highway, a 3-lane highway, say Facebook, Amazon, and Google, and they're literally blocking everybody else. And so nobody can get by, and it's very hard to get around them because there's no real true monopoly because they don't compete against each other exactly. So I think it's really hard for innovation right now, and I don't know what will change that. That said, I never count. You never knew that Facebook would come up. You never knew that Google would come up. You never knew that Amazon would come up. And so I always assume at some point there's going to be another innovation. This time, though, I think it's not going to be from this country. It's going to be from China or some other country, or India or somewhere else.
Well, I mean, Waze, Kara, gets created out of Israel and eventually gets bought by Google, right? I mean, that's been going on for years.
I'm talking about a big secular shift. I think China is leading the way in innovation. I've said this time and again. I think they are investing in computer science. I think they are investing in innovation. I think they are investing in startups. And I think that's who we're going to see the challenges from in terms of who controls the next internet age of automation, AI, transportation, all kinds of things that are critical, major issues. I think China is the competition.
You think we're behind, or are we ahead, losing our lead? A mix of the two?
I would say it's a mix of the two. I think they're way ahead in terms of where it's going. Where the puck is going, China is there. I think this country, with its lack of investment in the area, the fact that this administration still doesn't have a head technologist, head science person, making any of the investments in infrastructure necessary, doing any of the federal stuff that's necessary, you know, this and in education. I mean, and just in education alone, and these immigration policies, it all spells for disaster 10 years down the line, as far as I can tell.
I get all of that, Kara, but on the flip side, this has been one of the biggest sort of driving longer-term arguments around this so-called trade war and all the tariffs we've seen put in place, too, no?
No, I'm sorry. That's an argument over plastic toys, I think. You know, we're talking about the future and where I think these investments in AI and everything else. I think it's just we're not thinking about where it's going, especially in infrastructure, self-driving and things like that. We need to have real federal movement on some of these technologies, and you're not going to see it from this administration at all. I mean, I just don't even imagine they can do this. So they're busy obsessing on fake news and the media's fault and all this. And so I think what we need to do is really have at least Congress or states start to really understand how important investments in technology are going forward, especially the next technologies. But, you know, who's to say? But I do see the short term here with these tech companies, which are very powerful. They will probably rebound because they're in really good position, as John said.
Yeah. I had to ask you about Nellie Bowles' piece in the Times over the weekend about tech leaders who are not letting their kids have cell phones, have contracts with their nannies to limit their social time. Is that A, do you buy it? And B, how much of a tide shift is that in the Valley?
Yeah, it was a great piece. It was a really interesting piece, this whole issue around screens. I mean, it was kind of a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. It's an interesting trend, and I think a lot of people are concerned as parents about how to use, how much screen time kids should have. And it would not be surprising that tech people are the same way, is that they don't want their kids to be immersed in these worlds. You know, but it's sort of an interesting irony, I guess.
Kara, and finally bringing it back to the news of the day, when you see IBM, Red Hat, and of course we've had Salesforce, MuleSoft, Microsoft, GitHub, what has been the impact of open source if you draw it through to 2018, and now the fact that it's like everybody's taking it for granted? It's not a disruptive force so much as it's, hey, it's table stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a natural buy for IBM. I think it's a really interesting trend, and I think you're going to see a lot more purchases, and actually people going public too, as we've talked about. I think this Saudi thing actually are going to have some reverberations. Are companies going to just do the IPO route rather than get sucked up into these massive fundings and things like that? I think you're going to see a lot more deals like this, and I think it's an important one for IBM for sure. And it will have reverberations around the other companies in the sector, no question.